Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Now it's my pleasure to review the new edition of the Brown Book from Jordan's. I've used it in the past. It's a first-class book. What I do like about it is it's only in one volume, which does help me when I'm lugging things to court. Been using it recently and I decided I'd like, having used it again, to do a reasonably detailed review of the work. The work I'm looking at is the formal title, Civil Court Service 2015. We know it as the Brown Book from Jordan's. The general editor is now District Judge Graeme Smith with a team of contributors. There's a CD at the back. The people involved, a very large number of people. I'd like to thank all of them. I can't do it individually, but I'm really very grateful for the amount of work that goes into this. We have to rely on this sort of information. And it's always in the private sector domain effectively because of the white book, the green book and so forth. But this material is absolutely fundamental with the incredibly detailed rules that we now have. Quite unnecessarily detailed, but no one dares say it except for me. But I mean, we did want some simplicity into this. It just got worse and worse and worse, and it will get more. We've now got the rules, the practice directions, the protocols. I wonder what else they'll come up with. There's enough there already, but however, we have to know our way around the books. We have to know what you're comfortable with. I'm quite comfortable with the Brown Book. As I say, it's by Jordan's. Our reviews will be appearing hopefully in the journals and certainly on the web. And this book, I think, deserves a good mention because I'm certainly brought up on the white book and the green book when they were actually different types of publication, the green book being the county court practice and the white book being the Supreme Court practice. So I'm a little old because I go pre-CPR. But what we've got today here in one volume, and I'll show you the book in a minute, is something which I found quite useful because most of the information that you want is there. You will find that counsel, certainly in some of the cases in court, will always go to the white book, and that will be the ultimate detailed statement. But quite often you've got quite sufficient information here to deal with the actual issues that you're dealing with. For instance, I've just done one matter on abuse of process, which again, the detail in the white book is slightly more, but the basic principles are still in the Brown Book. And in fact, every case is different. So you always, as I found out in that particular case, you always have to argue your own particular line depending on what you've got in the way of the client's problem to put to the court. Now, Elizabeth and I looked at this book, we talked about it. There's a newsletter to go with it. They give a very good service, Jordan's. Do have a look at their website. The title of our review anyway is Good News for Brown Book Practitioners. The new Civil Court Service 2015 is out now. Now I'm recording this in the summer of 2015 and obviously there's been quite a little bit of change. This came out at Easter. There it is anyway. It's a nice big book. See a few little shaded areas. It's only one volume, he says, only one volume. There's the back with the CD. I don't use CDs myself, but what you do have is a very useful list of parts, the CPR, the back, and what you've got with that, if you look over, you see the first, right at the back, the civil procedure rules are listed by number, so that's very quick and easy to find. If I work backwards, you will see that there is an extremely detailed index there, which is to be expected. It's 3,000, well over 3,000 pages long. It's a heavy book, hardback. You can see even just by opening it a few times that it does have these very useful dividers, so you can find things quickly. You will find on the side where the shaded areas are there information particularly about which part you're looking at. This is the civil procedure rules themselves. Let me go to the front of the book, calendar right in inside front cover. Then you've got the Civil Court Service. One thing I would be, I think it's very important to mention, you can see the paper's quite flimsy. Now I don't mean to say it's not tough, because it is, but when you're photocopying, be careful, because I find that sometimes the papers do scrunch up a bit, and then you've got to photocopy the page. That's the team. Now, I can't go through everybody, but you can see the team starts with the Right Honourable Lord Justice Laws as the Editor-in-Chief, then the founding editors, general editors now Graeme Smith, and then contributors. And you've got a list of people who are probably well known to many of you since this new edition came out. Now, the first edition came out in 1999, and Lord Savile Newdigate gave an extremely useful foreword to it. This is the formal statement on what the Brown Book is, just so you can see it there. These are, of course, private sector companies producing this information. There's the preface from Lord Justice Laws there, from the 1999, and then you've got the content section, the structure. Now, it is, because it's only one volume, it actually makes it a bit easier to read. And I'm going to say that now, because if you look at the Green Book and the White Book, and I'm not here to debunk them, but I'm just going to say that this, I think, makes it a bit simpler. And what I did like about the introduction is Magna Carta. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then you get that this is actually... I conclude by wishing all my readers a very happy Magna Carta Day on the 15th of June. He means 2015. He actually signed it in February 2015. But thank you, Graham. We had a very nice time. There's the table of statutes there. And then you've got, after statutory instruments, of course, then cases as well. And then you've got lots of nice abbreviations, so you've got plenty to look at there. Then you get into the main area, Section 1, Procedural Guides. Now, the reason I'm going through this is so that you've got some idea of what's actually in this book. If you haven't actually seen it, you haven't been able to go to the library and get a look at it. Procedural Guides there. And then that starts off with all the various guides, which, again, relatively new to some people. I mean, we've got used to it. And then after that, you go to the applications area. Then you go straight into CPR after that. There. Then after that, you've got all the way through CPR and the practice directions. Then you've got the whole list of things like the practice direction on insolvency. Remember the insolvency rules changing in October. You've got the lots of pre-action protocols, very important now, I mentioned that earlier. You've then got the Admiralty and Commercial Court Guide, Chancery Guide, Patents Court Guide, so forth. Technology and Construction Court Guide, always of interest. Then you've got some legislation at the back. Do remember that with both the Green Book and the White Book, that they've got a lot of legislation, a huge amount of detail, but what you've got here is what you actually need for court, and that's really why I like it. Then you've got various other regulations, weights and measures right at the back and so forth. And then you get to the index itself, which is a very detailed index. Now you can see the names of the people from the spine, and you can see all the people involved there. Thank you to every single one of you for the contribution you make. You do make our lives a lot easier. It's a real problem trying to understand half the time what's going on. There is a stop press which came with this because it came out at Easter after the other practice books, and it's got the list of the changes of fees apart from other things. So there are a number of points in the Brown Book which make it more up to date than the other books. Having said all of that, of course, they all have their own newsletters and updates. The Green Book does, and so forth, and the White Book. So therefore, you've got to keep as up to date as you can. And what I do advise is that do have a look at it regularly, keep up to date. Also have a look at the website from the Ministry of Justice. I don't really know what they're playing at, because I would have liked to have seen a full merge of the White Book, the Green Book and the Brown Book onto the Ministry of Justice website, which would be everything would be contained in it, which the judiciary would find helpful, council would find helpful, and so on. That hasn't happened, so it's like the curate's egg, the Ministry of Justice website. They need to get a grip of it. I'm sure they will do in due course as life and times move forward. We're all very much into the internet and information technology era now, and that's the way forward. I don't personally find the CD that helpful. It can be helpful in printing certain things out, like a protocol, a particular set of rules, and also of course you can cut and paste if, as I have found recently, certain people when they do their skeletons just cut and paste a whole section of the white book or the brown book and just shove it in their skeleton. It doesn't become a skeleton. It's actually the full-blown body then, because what you've got is a skeleton is 2 or 3 pages normally, not the classic I had was 93 pages as a skeleton. So do bear those comments in mind. This is what we say about the brown book. Once again, Jordan's has produced its new edition of the Civil Court Service 2015, which is widely known as the Brown Book. Time of publication around Easter. It was regarded as the most up-to-date statement at that time of the main civil jurisdiction practice. Claims to fame are, of course, they did actually have a number of very up-to-date pieces of information. As I've indicated, there are some holes in the brown book. They're bound to be, because it's not as big as the green book, or even bigger book, the white book. However, it gives what you need, and I think that's the important factor. If you're going to have to do any really detailed research, the likelihood is that the judge isn't going to know that much about it either. So what they'll do is give you time. If you need to cross-refer with this and the other books, depending on which ones they're using, you can at least have some range of opinion to put forward in your submissions. Now, what we say then is, as the book has appeared annually since 1999, it's a testament in itself to the high regard in which it's held by practitioners. It's published annually, as I say, and is of course a dire necessity in view of the relentless tide of changes constantly emerging within the civil justice system. Now, in the 800th anniversary of the sealing of Magna Carta, what, asks General Editor Graeme Smith, would King John and the barons have made of today's civil justice system? If there's an answer to that, it would probably be that they'd need the Brown Book. Well, actually the barons would. King John was probably illiterate. This new edition reflects the latest amendments to CPR, which indicate its continuing state of change. And it's not for the better, let's be blunt. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There are, of course, amendments to reflect case law, are bigger and bigger and bigger. To incorporate new legislation, same applies. And to incorporate new European regulations and amended European regulations. Again, it's just growing at the moment, and we'll have to call a halt to it at some stage, because it's just going to get worse unless a bit of sense comes into it. However, there's a new part in the Brown Book incorporating the remaining rules of the High Court and County Courts, and other amendments such as the Road Traffic Accidents Protocol, for example, reflect changes in policy or practice which are most welcome. And the protocols, I've used them as well. I found them very helpful. They are updated from the earlier versions which came out to include case law and views, so I do think you will find most of what you want. But at the end of the day, as an advocate, you've got to try and put forward the best case you can for your client. But this statement will give you some indication of the strength of your possible argument and merits thereof when you're in front of the judge. The new edition, as I've indicated, does reflect these changes. It's logically organised, and the needs of the practitioner in mind are at the fore. The editors and the contributors have introduced a new style of introduction for the parts of the rules most frequently referred to. This, for example, includes an overview of the part, a list of the relevant principal forms, a summary of significant recent developments, and more. And I rather like that approach, because otherwise you've then got to cross-refer, if it's either the green book or the white book, to the forms section. And as you know, you've got separate volumes for that. And I did find that getting to be a bit irksome, because you're going to have a very large table in which to have all this information laid out. Another change implemented in response to reader demand is that the courts directory, now online and therefore omitted from previous editions, now been reinstated in this new one, following quite sensible suggestions that practitioners do need to have this information available in a work of reference as well as online. And I'm going to make a point here. what would that other institutions and or publications take what would be a responsible and enlightened view, because there's too much arrogance at the moment expecting us to find everything on the web, when in fact what we really need to have is a little bit of stuff set out, as with the Courts Directory, in the books themselves. They ought to think, those guys at the top running things, about what we've got to do right down at the bottom. And I sometimes don't think they do, because it's all done for their own benefit to the exclusion of us. And that's been very apparent with the arrogance over the use of the internet. So I hope that they will take that in mind. And that's my little message of the day on that one. But I do thank the editors for bringing some of this stuff back, because we do need to have this stuff at our fingertips. Just like, for instance, you've got right at the front the actual calendar, which is extremely helpful if you're suddenly looking for a particular date. Let me conclude by saying that certainly this volume, which runs to well over 3,300 pages, is an invaluable reference source and remains so. It contains tables of statutes, SIs, cases and PDs, plus the protocols, and there's a decent detailed index at the back, which I think is very helpful for finding things quickly. You've got the Civil Procedure Rules Quick Finder on the inside back cover, which I also think is very helpful. And you've also got the CD-ROM if that's your particular way of dealing with things. And I do recognise that a lot of younger practitioners probably will find that much more helpful than older persons such as myself. Note to the sock press insert, which I just dropped down, which I'm going to pick up again, which is here. It does fall out, this stop press. You might want to stick it in the book, which actually gives you the updated information. So, and also, of course, you've got the newsletter. Do go to the Jordan's website as well to keep up to date with what's happening. So we as practitioners, finally, I'd say, are very grateful, believe me, for the excellent service we get. It's reliable, current, and unarguably very speedy, provided by the new Civil Court Service. And I like this because it's easier to carry around, and actually it's got basically what I need. But if I do need to go any further, I will go to the library or actually at court look at the green or white books. Every practitioner needs to stay up to date with developments within the civil jurisdiction, with what is happening, and they should get a copy of this book. It has always been my practice in the part to have more than one practice book, because it depends very much on the type of case you're going to get. Let me just show you the book very quickly again. There it is, the brown book. Very heavy, but nice and strong. There's the spine, nothing on the back. And then you just remember these shaded areas. Let me just show you the CPR side of it, because, again, I think CPR is quite important from the point of view of how it is laid out, because one of the things that I do think is very useful is to know your way around the books, because you can spend an awful lot of time otherwise wasted, when in fact what you really want to do is know a quick way around. Let's look at part 39, miscellaneous provisions relating to hearings. There we go. So what you've got there is you've got a little minor index at the front, then you've got an interpretation, the general rule and all the details. Then immediately after that, of course, you've got the usual commentaries, which are very helpful, which is where you can put some of your skeleton argument detail. And I mentioned that to counsel, now some, not all. Then you've got after that, you've got the actual information concerning the rule, which is the practice direction itself. And that's an amended practice direction, dealing with trial bundles and various other things. And the disgraceful behaviour that is still continuing of going to court and finding that you, as one of the parties, don't have a trial bundle because a relevant order hasn't been granted. And that does make life difficult, I can tell you. There again, there's part 40, there's judgment and orders, a very important area. Again, same thing, you've got an index at the front. And then right in, you've got the list of the practice directions. So it really does make it, I think, fairly compact. And I've found it, as I say, very easy to follow. I'm not saying that the green book and the white book aren't easy either. They are once you know your way around. but there's so much of it. And as I've said before, the end point is, when is it going to start getting a little smaller? The answer is probably not. We may have to start splitting things up even more, because it has been getting quite difficult. But thank you so much to everybody concerned. You do make our lives a lot easier. It can be really difficult knowing how to deal with the rules, what rules apply and what to do. And the judiciary sometimes have the same problems that we do. So just remember that when you're next in court. Thank you to all, and many thanks to Jordans for this great service you give us. Bye-bye.